Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'm going to be talking about the best budget shoes to work out in for $100 USD or less. So I have 6 training shoes up here and 2 wild cards.
Why aren't the brakes working?
Because I cut the brakes! Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
And I'm going to go through all the pros and cons that come along with each model and where they perform the best. I have individual reviews on every single shoe featured in this video. I'm going to link those in the description below, so definitely check those out if you want additional info on any of the models featured. I also have a roundup talking about some of the best budget trainers on the market. That's also linked in the description below. But that being said, let's dive into our first model. The first model that I'm going to be covering is the Reebok Nanoflex TR2. Now, when this model went live initially, it was called the Nanoflex V2. Why Reebok decided to change the name is beyond me, but I've already had to answer a couple of questions about the name of the shoe. They are the same thing, the V2 versus the TR2. It is the same exact model. This model comes in at a price point of $90 USD. Now, a couple of pros that I have with the shoe is number one, it's a pretty good, well-rounded training shoe. So if you want a shoe for some functional fitness, some moderately heavy lifting, classes and HIIT workouts, and then even some shorter runs, the Nanoflex TR2 does a pretty good job. It is a much better model compared to the Nanoflex TR, the original, because it fits better, it gives you a slightly better midsole, and the outsole I think is also better too in regard to overall fit and how it interacts with the ground, giving you traction. So across the board, the Nanoflex TR2 I think does a really good job of giving you a strong performance in a lot of different training contexts. Another pro that I have with this shoe is a couple of the construction features. So we have a meta split tech here on the outsole, so you get a nice level of maneuverability through the outsole. It honestly kind of reminds me of the outsole construction in the Nano 9 and 10, how it had like this kind of split tech through the forefoot, so this model breaks in pretty easy. I also like the rope pro tech in this shoe. I actually think this model is a little bit better than the Nano 12 for rope climbing because it doesn't have such a harsh sole construction here to where it starts to lip and break down quick. So you can do rope climbs in this model and it should do an okay job at that. And I also like the plastic TPU heel clip back here. It gives you additional ankle support if that is something that you're after. Now, a con that comes along with the Nanoflex TR2 is that despite being a pretty good shoe for a little bit of everything, as you go more niche with your training, this model will start to fall off. Its stack height isn't the best for things like heavy deadlifts, so for my barbell focused folks, you may want to pass on this shoe and look for something a little bit more specific that'll give you a bit more stability for your needs. And then in the context of things like CrossFit, you can find models that are going to be a little bit more focused for that style of training compared to the Nanoflex TR2. So while it is a really great shoe across the board, it will have some limitations with its performance. But overall, I think the Nanoflex TR2 is a pretty good performer for under $100 USD. The next model I'm going to be covering is the New Balance FuelCell Shift TR. This model comes in at a price point of $99.99 USD. Now, why I like this model and a couple of pros that come along with the shoe is number one, its midsole construction. So you get the FuelCell Shift foam midsole in this model. It gives you a nice level of bounce. So if you want a shoe primarily for HIIT workouts and classes, this can be a really good model to look into. It's going to be very lightweight and responsive, and it breaks in pretty easy. Another pro that I have with this model is the outsole tread. So while it's not going to be the best model for outdoor training because we do have exposed foam, you get a nice level of tread up here in the forefoot and heel. So if you're training on turf or rubber gym floors and in class settings for that matter, this model should give you a nice level of traction for multi-directional activities, and it should bite well on most surfaces that you're going to be training on. Another pro that I have with the shoe is the Fit Weave Light upper. So with this model's upper construction, it is super lightweight and super breathable, so it does form fit the foot pretty well. So I do think a lot of folks will resonate with the upper construction in the shoe, especially if you are training in settings where it is going to be a little bit warmer and you want your feet to have a little bit more breathability. Now, a couple of cons that I have with the shoe is number one, I already briefly touched on this, but it's not going to be your best shoe for training outdoors. We do have exposed foam here, so the shoe can break down a little bit faster if you're training outdoors in them, or if you're wearing them a lot for daily wear in inclement weather where you're trekking through like a lot of water or mud, where you can kind of start breaking down this foam at a faster rate. Another con with this shoe is that it's not going to be your best for custom orthotics and inserts. We do have a slightly lower upper volume, so if you do have slightly thicker custom orthotics or inserts, I would say pass on this shoe. It also runs a little bit short. I addressed the sizing in my full review of this shoe. But overall, if you're looking for a lightweight shoe for classes and HIIT style training, the New Balance FuelCell Shift TR can be a viable option to explore. The next shoe that I'm going to be covering is the Puma FUSE 2. This model comes in at $100 USD, and that is up $10 than the original Puma FUSE that costs $90 USD. So not super stoked that Puma increased the price of this shoe. But a couple of pros that I have with this model is number one, if you're looking for a budget-friendly shoe for lifting and CrossFit, this can be a viable option. The original Puma FUSE had a lot of issues when it came to durability. This model is a little bit better across the board. We now have a reworked midfoot construction and material, so it is a little bit better for rope climbing, and the upper construction up here doesn't seem to break down nearly as fast from abrasion. So while it isn't going to be the best shoe for outdoor training, which I'll talk about in my cons, if you're training mostly indoors and you're lifting and doing functional fitness, this model should fare pretty well. Another pro that I have with this shoe is that it feels very athletic in nature. So we have a low volume upper, and if you like that in your training shoes, I think you'll resonate a lot with this shoe. It feels similar to almost like a cleat because of this low volume upper, and we have a Puma grip outsole that has a nice high level of maneuverability. So if you're doing sprints and jumps, I think you'll like how this model feels. I've enjoyed how this model felt for those sessions across the board. And the final thing to like about this shoe is that it's pretty dang comfortable. So we have a drop in midsole with this shoe. And while this can be a con for lifting, which I'll also discuss in a second, it is pretty comfortable. So if you want a shoe that you can rock out and about and then to the gym and kind of beat up for $100 or less and kind of hold its own across the board, the Puma FUSE 2 does a pretty good job. Now, on to the cons of this model. The first con is that this is not going to be your best shoe for training outdoors due to the upper construction up here covering the toe box. So the upper in this model is super lightweight and we have a nice synthetic material. That's great for keeping the shoe lightweight and breathable, but if you're dragging your toe on concrete, for example, doing burpees or any other form of training, you can have this start to break down. That's what I experienced. So I would say limit the Puma FUSE 2's use to indoor training versus outdoors if you can, especially if you plan to train on concrete. Another con with this shoe is that it's not going to be the most stable for heavier lifting. So you get this drop in midsole. And so while this midsole does a pretty good job with some moderately heavy lifting, once you start getting up into the 400s for deadlifts and squats, this will start to compress a little bit more. So definitely something to keep in mind if you are training at a very high strength threshold. But overall, the Puma FUSE 2 has been a nice upgrade to the Puma FUSE, and it can be a pretty viable option for athletes who want them primarily for lifting and CrossFit. The next model that I'm going to be covering is the Adidas Trainer V or V. It's not really clear on their website how they want to describe the shoe. But this model comes in at a price point of $80 USD. Now, two pros that I have with this shoe is number one, the bounce midsole. So the midsole in this shoe runs a little bit more rigid. So this model does take some time to break in. But if you want a budget shoe for lifting, I actually think the midsole does excel for that because it is a little bit more rigid. It doesn't compress as easy as some of the other training shoes featured in this video. So this can be a pretty viable option for folks who want to save a little bit of money on a training shoe for recreational lifting. Also, you get a nice level of tread with this outsole. So I think in the context of barbell lifts, machine work, accessory movements, this model should fare pretty well for most lifting contexts. Another pro with this shoe is that it's pretty dang durable, especially for an $80 shoe. So if you're just using them for lifting and maybe some HIIT workouts and maybe some athletic style training sessions on a weekly basis, this model should last you a while. Honestly, they're pretty thick and chunky and they're kind of like a tank when it comes to overall durability. So if you want a shoe that will last that costs less than $100 USD, this model should fare pretty well, especially for more recreational focused lifters and athletes out there. So a couple of cons that I have with this shoe, and I briefly touched on this in my pros, is that this model is a little bit more rigid. So if you like more articulation in your training shoes, this might not be the best model for you because they do take some time to break in. They are pretty thick in nature, and that bounce midsole doesn't give you the most articulative surface to train on. Another con that I have with the shoe is that they can run pretty hot as well. So I mentioned this already, but they are pretty thick. You have a pretty thick padding back here on the boot, and the knit could be a little bit more breathable because we also have a synthetic layer here, and overall the upper does feel a little bit heavier in the shoe. So this model does not breathe the best. But if you're looking for a budget-friendly model for recreational lifting, maybe some functional fitness here and there, and maybe some athletic style sessions on a weekly basis that tends to last a while, the Adidas Trainer V/5 can work pretty well. The next model that I'm going to cover is the Nike MC Trainer 2. So this model comes in at a price point of $75 USD, and compared to all the shoes featured in this video, this is the most cost-efficient shoe in my roundup. So why I like the MC Trainer 2 is number one, if you're somebody who's a lot more recreational in nature, or even if you're a beginner or intermediate with your lifting, this model should give you enough stability. So you do get a medium density foam midsole in this model, and it walks that nice fine line between being stable enough for most strength contexts, but then also being responsive enough for athletic style contexts. And that takes me into my second pro, is that if you're somebody who likes to do plyometrics, some HIIT workouts here and there on a weekly basis, and blend those into workouts where you're also doing some strength stuff, this can be a viable option, especially if you're trying to spend less than $100 USD. This model feels very athletic in nature, especially once they're broken in, and they're a little bit less stiff through the midfoot than the MC Trainer, which was one of my cons with that model. So this model does run a little bit more stiff, but it is a little bit more articulative overall, especially through the forefoot for more athletic style training sessions. So if you like to blend that style of training into your weekly basis, this model can be a viable option. Another pro that I have with this shoe is the overall breathability of the upper construction. So we have a mesh upper with synthetic overlays. We also have an additional strap down here for security. Whether that really does that much, I'm not sold on this feature. But overall, the upper does breathe pretty well. So I do think that if you're training in hotter settings or if you're training outdoors a lot, especially in warmer months, this model should give you a nice level of breathability. Now, two cons that I have with the MC Trainer 2 is number one, if you have a wider or flatter foot, this will likely not be the best model for you. It does run a little bit more narrow through the midfoot and forefoot here, and you're likely gonna feel a little bit constricted. Also, we do have a pretty beefy medial midfoot material here. So if you have a flatter foot, especially through the midfoot, you're likely gonna feel like this is jamming into your arch. The second con that I have with the shoe is the heel construction. So the heel kind of juts out in this model. So for shorter runs and exercises where you're gonna be having the heel hit first and then have the rest of the foot land, it can be a little bit uncomfortable at times. But overall, the MC Trainer 2, I think, is a leveled up shoe compared to the MC Trainer. And if you have a narrow or neutral width foot and you want a shoe for athletic style training for much less than $100 USD, the MC Trainer 2 can be a viable option to explore. The next model that I'm going to be covering is the Under Armour Project Rock BSR 2. So this is the Project Rock 5's budget-friendly cousin, and this model comes in at a price point of $100 USD. Now, a few pros that I have with this shoe is that, like some of the other models, it is very good for a little bit of everything. So if you want a shoe for some HIIT training, some lifting, some shorter runs, and then even some class style workouts or athletic style sessions, the BSR 2 can hold its own for that context. Another pro that I have with this shoe is the charged midsole. It gives you a nice level of bounce, but it also is stable enough to train pretty heavy in. So once you break this model in, it does give you a nice level of responsiveness when you're really digging into the forefoot. Another pro that I have with this shoe is the tri-base tech in the outsole. So I like this feature when Under Armour uses it in their training shoes. I often find that it gives me a little bit more stability throughout the outsole of the shoe, and it gives me a nice level of tread. So for unilateral work, for multi-directional exercises, the BSR 2 typically does a really good job. Now, a couple of cons that I have with the BSR 2 is number one, it does take a little bit to break in. Because we do have a thicker charged midsole, it doesn't give you the most articulative feel, so you are gonna have to take about a week or two to really break this shoe in, and it does take a little bit of time, so expect that if you invest in this shoe. Another con that I have with this model is that it's not the widest of the forefoot. So if you have a wider forefoot and you want more room to really splay those toes, this model may feel a little bit limiting. Plus, with its lightweight mesh upper construction, if you do have a wider foot, you might start to have some overhang in the shoe. So definitely keep that in mind if you invest in this model and you have a flatter or wider foot. But overall, I do think the BSR 2 is a step in the right direction for the BSR line. And I think if you typically like Under Armour training shoes and you like the Rock, this can be a really great option to explore, especially if you're trying to spend $100 or less. All right, so now let's dive into some of our wild cards. So the first model is the Vans UltraRange EXO. So this model comes in at $100 USD. However, you can often find them on sale for less. So definitely shop around if you're looking into this model. But three pros that I have with the shoe is number one, the Ultra Cush Light midsole is super comfortable for both training and daily wear. So this model works okay for some lighter lifting, it works for some lighter cross training, and it can be a decent shoe in the gym if you're doing a little bit of everything. But I also like that it's super comfortable for daily wear. So if you want a shoe for walking and just standing, so let's say you work a retail job or you're gonna be on your feet all day, this can be a good option to explore because of its overall comfort. Another pro that I have with this shoe is its lightweight upper construction. So we have a mesh upper with a synthetic overlay over the toe box, and as a whole, the shoe breathes really well. So in hotter contexts, the shoe should give you a nice level of breathability. And I actually like wearing these with and without socks because the upper is so lightweight and breathes so well that it feels really good on the feet, whether you're wearing socks or not. Now I will say, don't skate in this shoe. I tore this by skating in it, and the upper, while being nice and lightweight and breathable, isn't the best for durability, which I will talk about in my cons in just a second. Another pro that I have with this model is that it has a nice classic appearance to it. So if you like that classic Vans aesthetic and you want a shoe that can do a little bit of everything but also gives you a little bit more cushion and comfort compared to the traditional Vans shoes, this can be an awesome option to explore. You also get a nice level of tread with this outsole for both daily wear and training. Now, a couple of cons that I have with the shoe is number one, the long-term durability, the durability isn't the best, especially around the toe box of this shoe. So if you are going super hard in the gym and you're doing a lot of multi-directional work or a lot of plyos, I would say you might want to look into a model that can be a little bit more specific for your needs, because while this shoe does work for some training context, it's not going to be your best bet for serious training. And that brings me into my second con, which is this shoe will have some limitations in the gym. It's not going to be your best shoe for heavy lifting. It offers less stability than the traditional like Vans Authentic or Skate High. And when it comes to long-term durability, once again, it's not the best. So when it comes to abrasion resistance from cross training and even CrossFit, this shoe can fall short at times. Overall though, I do like the Vans UltraRange EXO. I wish the upper was a little bit more durable. However, as a daily wear shoe and a shoe for some general training, this model works really well. Our final wildcard and shoe of this video is the Adidas The Total. So this model comes in at $100 USD, but like all the other shoes in this video, you can often find this model on sale as well. So 3 pros that I have with this shoe is number 1, the stability is awesome in this model. So if you're somebody who wants a shoe primarily for recreational lifting and even competing in powerlifting, the Total can be a great option to explore. Or if you're just somebody who's super focused on their strength work, because you have a nice stable construction in the shoe, you can squat, deadlift really heavy in this model, or use it for accessory exercises, machine work, etc. And you shouldn't have any issues with stability whatsoever. The second pro that I have with the shoe is the wide toe box and the outsole construction. So this model has a wider toe box, so I think most foot anatomies will align well with how much room you get in this model's toe box to display the toes, especially for deadlifts and squats. And I also like how grippy the outsole is. So whether you're pulling conventional or sumo, you shouldn't have slip issues in the shoe. And whether you're training on rubber gym floors or wooden platforms, I don't think traction will be an issue in this shoe. The third pro that I have with the shoe is the midfoot strap and its zero drop construction. So the midfoot strap is nice because it gives you a nice variety when it comes to your midfoot security. And if you like flatter shoes, but you don't feel like going like true minimalist shoe, this can be an awesome option to explore because it does give you a slightly higher stack height than a true minimalist or barefoot shoe. So you do get a tiny bit more cushion for it, which I think is awesome for folks who may not be acclimated to minimalist shoes or have the desire to invest in them. Now, a couple of cons that I have with the Adidas The Total is number 1, it is not going to be your most versatile shoe. So if you're looking for a shoe for cross training, for example, look into the other models in this video. This model will be a little bit more limited in nature, and it's going to be best served for recreational lifting and strength work. Another con that I have with this shoe is that while it has a zero drop construction and it is very stable, if you want to get as close to the ground as possible, the stack height of the shoe might be a little bit off-putting for you, and you might want to look into something that's a lot more minimalist in nature. But overall, I've really enjoyed the Total's performance. I like it because it kind of walks this in-between land between a true minimalist shoe and like a thicker midsoled cross-training shoe. So if you want something that's dedicated to lifting, has a zero drop construction, and is a little bit more athletic than something like a Converse or a Vans, the Total can be an awesome option to explore. All right, y'all, that wraps up this roundup covering some of my favorite shoes to work out in for $100 USD or less. If you have any additional questions on any of the shoes featured in this video, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, drop a like on the video, drop subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one. And to everybody who is crapping on my Walmart shoe racks, we have some nice, beautiful bamboo racks here in the background. Hopefully they look better for you, but I also feel like that's needed for every single roundup these days, but I'll see you guys in the next one.